Hello, everyone, and welcome to our February 2022 What's Up in the Sky program brought to you by the Astronomical Society of Penang. I'll be your host, Dr. Derek Lim, and I'll tell you about the events in the night sky for February 2022. We start off the February evening sky of 2022 with Jupiter bidding a farewell in the evening sky. As the planet sets earlier and earlier each evening, it heads towards the superior conjunction behind the Sun on March the 5th, 2022. So the evening sky will have no planets left except Uranus. So planetary aficionados can look for the planet Uranus shining at the brink of the naked eye visibility near magnitude 6 in the constellation of Aries. Preferably, you will want to use a pair of binoculars to look for the planet. It will appear about a greenish-bluish faint star in the constellation of Aries. If you're interested in comets, Comet Borrelly shines at magnitude 9 not too far from Uranus in the constellation of Aries as well. You would certainly need binoculars or a telescope to observe this comet. In the evenings of February 2nd and 3rd, watch for the Moon and Jupiter about 8 degrees and 6 degrees apart on each evening. It will be a nice pairing in an evening sky after the sun sets. The Moon will subsequently wax to its full phase on February 15th, 2022. And that's about the interesting events in the evening sky for February. So let's head on to the early morning sky. For early risers, watch for the Milky Way's galactic core returning to the early morning sky and rising just before sunrise. Venus and Mars accompany the Milky Way's galactic core shining in the east just before sunrise. On February 13th, Venus will also reach its greatest apparent brightness, shining at a brilliant magnitude negative 4.9. So what makes Venus reach its greatest apparent brightness on this day? There are three main contributors to this event. The first thing is the surface reflectivity or albedo of Venus. So Venus has an atmosphere of sulfuric acid, and it is permanently shrouded in a cloud. And that means that it reflects a lot of sunlight from its surface. Specifically, 75% of the sunlight hitting the surface of Venus is actually reflected back into space. This means that Venus has an albedo of 0.75. Okay. Now, the other factor is, of course, the distance between the object, okay, which is Venus, and the Earth. So on February 13th, Venus is also relatively close to the Earth in its orbit. And the third factor is, of course, the phase or percent of surface that is illuminated by the sun on Venus. These three factors work together to contribute to the greatest apparent brightness of Venus on February 13th. Okay, and actually it is calculated to be pretty consistent that whenever Venus reaches about 26 degrees away from the sun in the section of its orbit that is closer to the Earth from the Earth's vantage point, then Venus will reach its greatest apparent brightness. So this is actually quite an interesting calculation that was done and published in the earlier times of astronomy. And on the morning of February 14th, watch for Mercury reaching its greatest western elongation in the morning sky, low in the eastern horizon. Finally, on the morning of February 27th, the Moon, Venus, and Mars will meet together near the galactic core in the early morning sky. So don't miss this beautiful event and opportunity to photograph the Milky Way's galactic core together with the planet Venus and Mars and the waning crescent moon. Should be a beautiful sight. And that's pretty much all the events for the month of February. It has been a while since we've had a constellation of the month. And of course, for this month, let's bring it back. And we would like to highlight the constellation of Orion as the constellation of the month of February 2022. Orion is a very well known constellation, and many people can recognize the rectangular box of bright stars surrounding three stars in a row within the box. So the constellation of Orion has become a popular target for many sky observers, including astrophotographers and visual observers of the night sky. This is also for good reason because Orion boasts many nebulae, including the most popular Orion Nebula. The brightest star in Orion, some of the time, is the star called Betelgeuse. And it is a very interesting orange star in itself because it is a red supergiant, meaning that it is at the end of its stellar life stage, and the star could go supernova, meaning it would explode with the energy of all the stars in the galaxy put together within about 1,000 years. This is a very short time scale in a stellar lifetime scale, so it means that Betelgeuse itself is nearing its end of life. In fact, many astronomers were speculating whether Betelgeuse was close to exploding in the year 2019 and 2020 when the star suddenly dimmed by about 2.5 times. Apparently, it may have been due to some obscuring dust between us and the star. And Betelgeuse right now has pretty much returned to its original brightness. The other bright star in Orion is Rigel. And Rigel is also a very interesting star because if you take a telescope and aim it at Rigel, you will see that it has actually a tiny little companion star. You will need about at least a 4-inch telescope to see this companion because the companion star is pretty dim compared to Rigel. I was able to observe the companion star of Rigel through my 5-inch Maksutov Cassegrain telescope at about 120 times magnification. It was quite a pretty sight. The belt stars of Orion are Mintaka, Alnilam, and Alnitak, and right beside Alnitak is the ever popular Flame and Horsehead Nebula. This is a target that is a favorite for astrophotographers since it is very beautiful. Its pinkish glow and the horsehead shaped dark nebula silhouetted against a cloud of pink is always a favorite view of many astronomy enthusiasts. The Sword of Orion, just to the south of the belt, boasts one of the brightest star-forming regions in the sky. And despite it being 1,500 light years away, the Orion Nebula, or M42, is easily visible to the naked eye at magnitude 4. Since it is so easily visible to the naked eye, it is easy to find, and hence the Orion Nebula is a great target for beginning deep sky observers and photographers, and even seasoned amateur astronomers or seasoned astrophotographers also like to come back to revisit the Orion Nebula once in a while just to take in the splendor and beauty of this deep sky object, the star forming region. There's actually accounts by observers who have observed this nebula over a long span of time, about 30 years, and noticing that they are actually new stars appearing from within the nebula. So this nebula is actually a very interesting target to observe throughout even our lifetime. The constellation of Orion also contains the Orion Molecular Cloud Complex, which is actually a whole interstellar cloud complex that is within the boundaries of the constellation of Orion. This interstellar cloud complex is actually containing a lot of the nebulae that I mentioned before, including the Orion Nebula, the Horsehead Nebula, the Flame Nebula, M78, Barnard's Loop, etc. Many people like to image the entire constellation of Orion and include this Orion molecular cloud complex. The Orion molecular cloud complex is particularly attractive because of all the colors of nebulosity within this complex, including reddish, bluish, magenta nebulosity. A good focal length range to use will be from 35 millimeters to about 85 millimeters, depending on the view of the constellation that you would like. Preferably, we would want to use an astro-modified camera that is more sensitive to the red colored nebulosity in the sky. Last but not least, there's a very interesting object in Orion that is not a nebula that is very worth looking for or observing through a telescope. And this is called the 37 cluster, or known as NGC 2169. The interesting feature of this cluster is the stars are lined in the shape of the number 37. So go figure, is this a mere coincidence or is there more than meets the eye in the sky? And that will conclude our February 2022 What's Up in the Sky. The Astronomical Society of Penang is happy to have you guys participate in our monthly events. And please visit astronomicalsocietyofpenang.com or our Facebook page, where you can find out more information of possible upcoming events, whether it be online or whether we're allowed to finally have public events. Please follow our sites to get the most up-to-date information, and we'll see you all next month. Take care.